All right, everyone. Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to my monthly office hour session. I'm looking forward to today's session. I've got a handful of things that I'm looking forward to sharing with you. Some stuff from, I got a couple things that are related, that are from the, one more thing. Oh, forgot one thing. Just one second. Let me set up my other streaming. Screwed up something here. One second. Oh no, I made a mistake. One second. Okay, almost. One second. I think I'm there. Okay, cool. Oh my gosh. Sorry, I made a bit of a mistake there. I forgot to, I'm actually streaming this in two different places, and I forgot to stream it to my student experience. So my bad for anybody who was looking for it over there as well. Big my mistake, and apologies for that. It's all there now. Yeah, thanks, Mohammed. I see you in the chat. I just realized, I was like, I thought I saw him say something. Where did he say that? And of course, apparently that's where you shared it. So that's where I'm going to go ahead. And start it. I went ahead and started it up. So this is also streaming to my YouTube channel, to Facebook Live, to LinkedIn Live. Yeah, so 4 places. So I'm doing this a little bit different from how I've done things in the past, in the sense that I've got, I'm posting this to my Voitanos Learn student portal. So students have access to this, and they have kind of priority access to be able to ask questions and get their questions answered. And then I have another spot where I'm going through and I'm streaming it, or like simulcasting it over to LinkedIn Live, YouTube Live to my channel on YouTube, and to Facebook Live to the Voitanos page on Facebook. So just go there, want to post a couple places. And of course, the one that I forgot to do it, the one that was most important, at least for me, is Voitanos Learn. So sorry about that. At any rate, now we can get started. So let's kick it off. And I'm just going to quickly introduce myself because, hey, we're going to spend the next hour or so together. Might as well know who I am. My name is Andrew Connell. I've been doing SharePoint and, well, really Microsoft 365 development for a very long time, over 20 years now. I'm a 21-year Microsoft MVP and started it back in September 2003, working on SharePoint. And I'm kind of like deep into Microsoft 365 development, SharePoint Framework development, building apps for Microsoft Teams, actually teaching my cohort-based course on Teams app development right now, SharePoint Embedded, and Microsoft 365 Copilot extensibility, so building custom agents. And then I leverage, and then other things inside of Microsoft 365 that are going to help me facilitate these different solutions, same as well as stuff related to Microsoft Azure. I guess one thing that would be nice too, if somebody wouldn't mind just dropping in the chat, whatever platform you're on, making sure that you can say that you can see the video, you can see my slides and me, and you can hear me. So let me know, like, really those two things. Can you see me and can you hear me right now? And I don't care what platform you're watching on. I'd like to hear about it on all of them, to drop something in the chat, just to give me a little bit of a confirmation that this stuff is working. So awesome. Thanks, Mohammed. So I see YouTube is working. That's good. All right. And Eric, thanks. Awesome for doing that over on Voitanos Learn. And I'll just keep an eye on some of the other ones that may be coming in. So just a little bit about me. I do a little bit more about me. I'm primarily like I guess, educational side, teaching and helping people, like mentoring with all of these different topics I mentioned up at the top. So I have a company called Voitanos, where I have courses, on-demand courses. I do live workshops on all the topics above, as well as live accelerator cohort-based courses that are extended over multiple weeks for learning things. I have one of those on SharePoint Framework. I have one of those on Microsoft Teams. As I said, I'm doing that one right now, about halfway through it. And then I also have I'm also working on some of those accelerators and additional workshops related to Copilot and some of the other topics you see up there. I do all that through my company, Voitanos. So it was a Microsoft MVP for the last 21 years. And then I also have a podcast that I co-host with a good friend of mine, Julie Turner, who's also a Microsoft MVP. We publish episodes every other Wednesday. So we have a new episode coming out tomorrow where I'm going to dive into a lot more of the details of one of the elements we're going to talk about, I'm going to cover today related to Teams. And then I also have and that podcast is the Code Deploy Go Live podcast, primarily a video podcast you can get on our YouTube channel or on Spotify. And then it also is syndicated to all the different podcatcher apps, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, you name it, all the ones, whatever you use to catch your podcast. So it comes out every 2 weeks. The last thing I wanted to mention here is I have a newsletter that I write and publish every 2 weeks. It's called the Fullstack Devs Microsoft 365 Playbook. That's going to change. I'm working on rebranding it to a different name that is a little bit shorter, actually a lot shorter. But if you're subscribed to it, it's just the name change. You will not lose your subscription or anything like that. So just keep an eye out for when that changes. I'm not sure exactly when I'm going to do it. I'm still not totally thrilled with one of the words I'm using for the title, but yeah, working on it. All right. So, and actually the newsletter, my goal of that, I publish that once every second Tuesday. And the reason, one of the things you get from it is not just insights on the Microsoft 365 development world, but I also highlight all of the biggest news that I think that you should be aware of. So a little bit of what I'm doing in these office hours, but then also I do it as a newsletter once every 2 weeks on a bi-weekly basis. So you can subscribe to the newsletter on the Voitanos website. You'll see subscribe links all over the place, namely in the footer of every page. All right, let's move on. How do I structure these office hours? I hold these office hours on the third Tuesday of every month. Sometimes we tweak up the schedule a little bit based on schedules and stuff. But I give you a heads up on that. So this is the third Tuesday of October. I'll have another one of those. I'll do it on the third Tuesday in November as well. And what I like to do is kind of go over some of the big news that I think that you should be aware of, and around the three main areas of the Microsoft 365 stack that developers should be aware of, and that's SharePoint, Microsoft Teams, and Microsoft 365 Copilot. And then at the end, I also, after we get through the news, I then like to cover any questions that have been submitted ahead of time. So I've only got 2 questions that were submitted. One was from Robbie and one was from Eric. Eric, I see you're connected here on Voitanos Learn, so I'm definitely going to cover your question. But I have all these will be. I'll go through and address those questions at the end of after I get through the news. That I'm going to try and get through kind of quick. If you have a question of something you wanted to ask or you wanted to discuss, drop it in the chat. Drop it in the chat of whatever platform wherever you're watching this. I will tell you that students that are connected in Voitanos Learn, their questions they get the highest priority, so they go right to the top if I get a bunch of questions. But I do want to make sure I get a chance to answer all of your questions that you pose. So if you don't get a chance to ask your question, or I don't get a chance to answer it in the hour we have together, then you can always post it to my site where this session is posted. So let's kick it off first. I'm just going to do general Microsoft 365 thing that I want to cover here. I've got a small update to the Microsoft 365 developer program. I think it's about time that I do another one of my big state of the dev program articles and videos on this. Microsoft put out an announcement late last week. I'll be honest, I'm disappointed again. Seems like that's what a common theme for the Microsoft 365 developer program is, to constantly let down and drop the ball on the developer experience for developers. So they had 2 announcements related to the dev program. and of course, not addressing the biggest issue. So for the Microsoft 365 developer program, there are two things they did. So one is that there is an automated onboarding process that will be added for ISVs and for people who are existing or are members of one of the eligible Microsoft AI Cloud partner programs that are available, that are supported. So if you are an ISV and you are like a registered ISV with Microsoft through the Partner Center, or you are a part of the MAICPP or one of those eligible programs, you will automatically be onboarded into the developer program. What that means is that when you get into the developer program, you will get a Microsoft 365 E5 license that you can have on a Microsoft 365 tenant. It is we've heard of things. I hear people always refer to these as like dev tenants. I refer to them as well. There's really nothing special about these developer tenants. Now, I'd say there's a couple things that when I say like nothing special, there's a little bit of like, how do I say this? There is a little bit of like some aspects that are either limiting or a little different around tenants you get from the Microsoft 365 developer program. For instance, you have a content pack that is automatically applied to your tenant, which means there's there's a bunch of users without licenses, but there's a bunch of users that are that have like messages and Teams and emails and meetings in their calendars. A bunch of teams are created with a bunch of content inside of those. So it's basically, you don't get like this empty tenant of this like blank canvas that you can play with. So that's one nice thing that's about those tenants. However, in the past, they did not support what are called add-on licenses. So for example, one of the biggest pain points is the Microsoft 365 Copilot license, the $30 per user per month license. We couldn't add that to a developer tenant. Because the developer tenants didn't support add-on licensing, or at least that SKU didn't. Well, that is going to change. Now, this does not apply to any existing developer tenants. So if you have one and you've gotten one maybe before the program got shut down or got put on lockdown back in January of 2024, or you got one through the ISV or the Cloud Partner Program or as a Visual Studio subscriber in the last few months or prior to recently, this does not apply to you because what it is, when you create a new tenant, you get actually a new SKU. And this new SKU that they're going to provision, it does support add-on licensing, or it will support add-on licensing. And it looks like this is going to be available to us starting around mid-November. So around when Ignite 2025, Microsoft's conference, I think it's in San Francisco, when that happens. So that's a nice benefit because then you'll be able to get access to a dev tenant, and you'd be able to get access to a subscription or an add-on license to it, to where you could do more stuff with it. So that's nice. That's a nice thing that we can do. Another thing they're talking about is that coming soon, there will be like a way that you can link your Visual Studio subscription to your developer. If you're a member of the developer program, how you can link your developer subscription to it. Not a lot of details around there. That blog post was fairly slim. You can get a link to the blog post from that QR code that you see there, or that short link that you see there at the bottom. And there's also something about a Copilot starter pack where it says, we'll make sure you have everything that you need to be able to start using Copilot. That's just the Copilot license, guys. So once you actually do have the Copilot license, it's like you can have everything installed. I don't know what they're talking about. There's nothing to install. So whatever. It's not really clear. So I'm not a big fan of all the stuff they've done. The dev program guys have done it. I know there are multiple people that have been involved. I appreciate the fact that they are making some progress, but my 2 cents, They still aren't addressing the issue where there is an easy way for people who want to get involved in working on Microsoft 365 development. They want an option to go through and to start playing with stuff. There is no option, right? There's no good option today from the dev program. Now, I think I will put together I do want to put together a bigger article that's kind of like the state of it as of October or Q4 2025. Last time I did an update was earlier this year. One of the things you can do is you can go buy, if you're like not an ISV, if you're not in the Microsoft AI Cloud Partner Program, you can go buy your own Visual Studio subscription. And it's a little confusing how it's written out, but that is either $100 per user per month, like $99.95, something $99.95. It's either $100 per user per month with an annual commitment, so that's $1,200, or there is you can get it for like, I think there's an enterprise option where it's like close to $500 per user per month with a 1-year commitment, right? So 500 times 12. After that 1 year, the price does drop down. I think the $99 drops down to like $65, and the $500 drops down to like $215. It's a little unclear if like the one that's the $99 gives you everything that you need. I think it does, but not entirely clear with that. So that's one option that you can do. But again, if you look at this, you're going like, so if I even do like the $99 option, that's still $1,200 a year for me to do like M365 development. And on top of that, I don't get Copilot, but I would have the ability to get an E5 subscription, which I'd get that for free, but I'd have to then buy the Copilot add-on license, which is another $30 per user per month, which comes out to 30 times 12 is $360. So now you're looking at about $1,500 per year. But the other option is screw the dev program, just go buy an E5, a business basics license, which is $6 per user per month for the 1-year commitment, $72, plus the Copilot $30 per user per month with an annual license, $360, $432, saving over $1,000 a year. So kind of look at the dev program going, what's the benefit? Like, what are you giving me that I don't already have, that I'm not going to get access to? So whatever. It's just kind of crappy. It's still, commercial still seems to be the way to go. So who knows? Anyway, I covered that one, beat that horse to death. Let's go move over to SharePoint. Now, our next office hours is going to be a whopper. In fact, I might even do a whole webinar dedicated just to this. So where are we at the SharePoint framework? Well, today we're still on SPFx version 1.21.1. You can see the stuff that was updated there. That came out many months ago, so nothing new to discuss there. I think it came out in May of 2025. The next version is version 1.22. You kind of can think of this as like a V2. It's not going to affect anything in your source folder, so nothing related specifically to like SPFx code. But what it is going to do is it's going to have a massive change to the developer pipeline. We're getting rid of Gulp. We're replacing it with Heft. Heft is a tool kind of like Gulp that is from is part of this bigger project called RushStack, which is an open source project, but it really is a Microsoft project that's open source. So you can expect to have anything, if you're doing anything to customize your tool chain. In other words, if you do anything, and when I mean anything inside of the gulpfile.js, you got some work to do, without a doubt. Keep an eye on my newsletter. I'm actually working on the documentation for Microsoft for what the migration story is going to look like. 1.22 is only going to cover the pipeline changes. So if you're not, I think it would be good to upgrade your projects to 1.22 just to make sure you're working on the new tool chain. But yeah, so I'll go into a lot more of that when the time comes, when the time is right. But right now, it's not a whole lot to say. We're currently on beta 3, and there's a few more things coming. They've said in so they also published a roadmap. Finally published a public roadmap, which is a little little suspect, that they published in September. But there's a bunch of questions that are still kind of outstanding to it, in my opinion. You can get a link to that right there, that QR code. Well, first of all, they said 1.22 is going to come out in October of this month. I guarantee you that's not going to happen. But the next version is going to include open sourcing the project templates we use in the Yeoman generator and a new open source SharePoint Framework CLI. And I've asked, I don't really understand why they're doing both of those. Kind of seems to me, if you're doing a CLI, that's going to be the new way to create projects, and you're going to get rid of Yeoman in a future version of SharePoint Framework, then what's the point of doing this thing up here? We should be switching over to this. I don't know. Still unclear. So I wouldn't say I'm glad they did a roadmap, but it still feels very, still a little confusing. They've also said they're going to have some improvements to command sets. Namely, I think they're looking at doing things like being able to group menus together, like into a submenu. They've talked about new and edit panels on like a list. When you open up the new edit forms on a list, that we'll have access to be able to put our own custom stuff over in that panel that slides in from the right. Instead of right now with the SharePoint framework where we always take over the entire page. I'm curious to see, like, is that going to be an either or? Do we get to choose? What do they mean exactly? We'll see. And then there's also a new debugging toolbar. We'll see what this does. I don't know. They're talking about that coming out in February of next year. And then in 1.24, they've said, here comes some navigation customizers. So I think that it's kind of like application customizers, but we can like swap out navigation. Maybe, I don't know if you remember from like the classic days of SharePoint, we could do like, we could do that with farm solutions and navigation providers in .NET. Is that the same thing? I don't know. We'll see. And then they said, plus more improvements. So I just put a more ... Who knows where we go with that? That's a solid, over a half a year away, almost 9 months away. They did also announce a new community advisory committee for the SharePoint framework that's made up of 11 Microsoft MVPs who are not, well, because they're MVPs, they don't work for Microsoft. But it is a way for us, it's a way for us to kind of have like a back channel of support, official like back channel support, and discussions with Microsoft to give them feedback and input and stuff. I'm honored to be on that list. I know somebody else that's here joining us live. Don Kirkman is also on that list. I'm scanning the list of people that I see who are connected here, and I don't see anybody else off the top of my head or at least I have access to and seeing the list. But I'm honored to be recognized and to be on the list, to be on the committee. Be curious to see like how this evolves over time. Just curious to see how this evolves over time. I'll just leave it at that. All right, so that's my SharePoint frameworky stuff. I don't think I have any more SharePoint frameworky. Nope, we have Teams. Haha. Guess what Microsoft 365 Dev did to us in September? They hit us upside the head with a baseball bat and a curveball. So I've wrote an article about this, and that's what that link is that you see there on the right-hand side. So Microsoft has done a big change with SDKs, and it all happened in September. It is not clear to the layperson and to the person who gets into Teams development, who is brand new to it, and even people who have been doing it for a while, it's confusing. So I wrote this article that kind of explains it and distills it down and gives you my opinion. Here's the high level part of it. When you build Teams apps, let's say, prior to September, you used if you built a tab, you use the Teams JavaScript library for your tab to communicate with the hosting client, the Teams web app or the Teams desktop app. When you're doing anything server side, you use TeamsFx. Think like SharePoint framework, TeamsFx, Teams framework. Get it? You use TeamsFx. All right, and that was a series of node packages that we had. So and then you also had some other stuff that you could use, like if you were using bots, you use the bot framework v4. if you wanted to leverage AI and large language models in your chatbots, you would use the Teams AI library v1. Well, in September, what Microsoft did is they shipped the GA version of something called Teams AI v2. And it sounds like when they talk about it, first of all, I'm just heads up. This name of Teams AI v2, in my opinion, one of the absolute worst names they could have chosen for this. I mean, with the exception of saying the Google AI library for Teams development, that might have been worse. Or the Amazon or AWS one, that might have been worse. But it's not that much worse. So the Teams AI v2, what this is a complete rewrite of the server-side SDK that we used to use for Teams development. Plus what we used to do with the Teams AI library v1 as part of Teams AI v2. The reason why I say the name is really crappy is because you could build tabs that don't have any AI in it, and you still are supposed to use the Teams AI v2. What I would tell you is you should think about the Teams AI v2 library. Think about it as SPFx v next, v today, right? So technically the last release was major release was version 4 of SPFx. So I would call it the SPFx v5 is how I would look at this. And it takes what used to be SPFx and Teams AI library v1, and it merges them down into one project that we use for server-side stuff. We still use the existing JavaScript library for client-side stuff for like tabs and personal apps, but we use for server-side stuff, we use the Teams AI v2, which is a full-blown SDK for stuff. I like the code that they've done. I think they've done a good job with the SDK in the Teams AI v2. I just think the name is terrible. I think the documentation is pretty weak. And they got a lot of work to do on that. I mean, very weak on samples as well. One nice thing about it is that it does come in both a JavaScript, Python, and .NET flavors that we can use. Now, the other thing they did is that at the same time, and they've also deprecated the Teams FX packages, and they will be fully retired in July of 2026, or at the end of either at the beginning or the end of July. It's a little unclear. I think it's the end of July. So July is the last time they have it. Now, the thing that I think was kind of like a big curveball and pretty frustrating. First of all, that name of Teams AI v2 is pretty bad because it implies it's all AI, which is not the case. But the other thing that I wanted to address here is the release of the the Microsoft 365 Agents Toolkit, ATK, version 6.2, which happened on September the 18th of 2025. When they released this, they did a complete refactoring of all the project templates related to Teams development and custom engine agents. And all of them have gotten rid of all Teams FX stuff. And they all now use the Teams AI v2 SDK, but they've also fundamentally changed a lot of the templates. For example, if you're familiar with creating a new tab using the React with Fluent UI template, it's gone and there's no equivalent to it, right? So personally for me, really frustrating because it all happened like just a few days before I started my Teams Accelerator, which means I've got to rebuild all of my demos and all of my recordings and all that kind of stuff that I have for my students. That's a me problem, not a you problem, getting it fixed. But still it's pretty darn frustrating because if you were a Teams dev that was used to doing stuff and you go to create a brand new project, you're like, what the hell? What happened? So a little bit of it, it's a little unfortunate, but yeah, I wrote this article, kind of explains how you should look at it. So that's the link that you see there on the side. All right, let's talk about Copilot. So what about Copilot? Really only one big update here. So Microsoft, so if you built declarative agents using the Agents Toolkit, the Microsoft 365 Agents Toolkit, or ATK, you are familiar with the fact that you generally create these declarative agents using low-code tools. So you use VS Code, but the most that you're going to do is just write text in JSON. Maybe you're also going to use YAML files to, which you can also use them as JSON files when you want to expose, when you want to call a REST API. All right. So when you want to call REST API, that is something that you can also do from these declarative agents, and you can define how all that works all through JSON. The last part there that actually exposes the REST API, you can do that as both JSON or YAML. It doesn't really matter. It's up to you. YAML is the general one, is what most people end up using. What Microsoft did throughout this year is they announced it at Build, and then they've been making updates to it throughout the summer, is they introduced a language called TypeSpec, which the Azure guys use, they use it for all of their APIs. What TypeSpec is a domain-specific language, a DSL, that is, you can use that to make it's easier to create your declarative agents or your REST APIs using TypeSpec. Because you think about this, if you've done anything with ARM templates, Azure Resource Manager, to provision stuff inside of Azure, they're big JSON templates and they're really unwieldy to work with. But what Microsoft did a couple of years ago is they introduced a DSL for ARM templates called Bicep. And so if I write a Bicep file, it's got a very, it's got an object-oriented style approach. There's properties on it. There's IntelliSense. There's, as you're writing it, there's like type checking. So it's a much better developer experience. And when you compile your Bicep file, it compiles down to a JSON ARM template. TypeSpec is like the same concept. When you compile TypeSpec files, they compile and generate all the stuff that you need for like defining REST APIs. What Microsoft 365 has done is they have created their own library, a TypeSpec library that will generate all the stuff we need to create a declarative agent. So the declarative agent manifest, the plugin manifest, and the Open API specification for a REST API. All right. They've made a lot of improvements in the most recent release, the release candidate 4. That came out in the last week or two. And I think we're probably looking at like a GA release of this and around Ignite. However, like today with the release candidate, it's perfectly valid to use it today in production things, because you're never going to ship, just like TypeScript, you never ship TypeScript to production. You always compile it to JavaScript and ship the JavaScript. With TypeSpec, you compile the TypeSpec, and when you package up your declarative agent, that package doesn't contain TypeSpec. It contains the JSON and YAML files that the TypeSpec generated. So I do think it's a much beneficial or much more productive way of creating declarative agents. Maybe not something for the low code people who are familiar with like JSON and text, but definitely something good for like pro code or full stack developers. I'm going to actually do a webinar on TypeSpec in a couple weeks. I'll have a link to it at the end of our office hours before we wrap up. Okay, so that's the release, and I just got a link there to the documentation for TypeSpec. And I've got a couple articles on my site if you're interested about that. Okay, so about halfway done. Now I'm going to tackle questions. Now, I haven't received any questions during our live session right now. So if you've got a question, please go ahead and post that question. And actually, let me just jump over to my Voitanos Learn to see if I've got any new questions that have been added. Nope, no new questions. All right, all good. So let's, if you do have a question, go ahead and drop it in the chat. But right now, what I want to do is I want to answer some of the questions that my students have submitted ahead of time. All right. So this one is from Ravi. So Ravi says, we got a SharePoint Framework solution that shows and hides a web part sections based on the user's role. Users are added via SharePoint Online groups that are nested at intra, he says AD, but nested intra security groups that have contribute permissions. So for example, he's got a legal group where the users in that group, they see the legal approval section on the web part. The compliance group sees the compliance section. All users have identical SharePoint permissions, okay? So his solution that he was looking for feedback on was he wants to create a delegated intra ID application with custom roles like compliance and legal, that are assigned to intra-ID security groups. And the app is going to require minimal permissions because they only need the role. So really you just need an ID token to determine like what the users, well, not, you need more than an ID token. You need to go through and get a scope to actually get the details about what roles they have that you've defined. So then in your SharePoint Framework web part, what he wants to do is request an access token from the intra app and decode it to retrieve the user's role for logic control. And then future access requires adding users to both the SharePoint group and the custom intra app for role assignment. And just asked, what do you think about this? Do you think this works? I guess I don't see why it wouldn't work. I guess one of the things I'm a little like, when you see security groups, usually that means that it's something that you can or can't have access to, but that's not something that you'd be able to do with this. You won't be able to say, the way you're talking about doing it, you wouldn't be hiding. I mean, you could hide stuff, but it doesn't keep people from actually getting to the content. I mean, maybe you take it out of the web parts rendering, but it's still going to ultimately get down to the user at least at some point to get that data, or to be able to render out the web part, and then you're going to show and hide certain pieces there. So would it work? I mean, I guess. I mean, you said in your question that you haven't tried it yet. So yeah, I mean, I guess you just got to try it out. You just got to try it out and see like what things, if any, you would run into. The other question is from Eric. So Eric said in June, he created a SharePoint Framework project with Yeoman, which we used the SharePoint Framework 1.20.0, which was dependent on Node 18. And when he did that, NPM added the Azure Core package, version 1.10, but that required Node 20. So that's because of the way that the SharePoint Framework guys do their dependencies, is they use that little caret or the tilde stuff that in front of the package versions, which says you can get a newer package, which can cause problems, as it did for Eric. So Eric got around this by saying, cool, even though Azure Core required version Node 20 or higher, he fixed it by upgrading his project to SPFx 1.21.1 because it only works on only on Node version 22. So Eric's question is, for new projects, should we always use the latest stable version, even if we have other projects on older versions? So, and then the rest of the question is, if you're keeping versions consistent is better, what is the best way to ensure NPM installs installs compatible library versions for a specific SPFx release? So there's a bunch of things related to this, and this is some things that I teach. I have a talk that I do about SharePoint Framework hidden gems. So I have a link there to an article that is going to talk about some of the stuff that I'm going to mention right here, Eric. But I have a bunch of other thoughts about it too, as well. The first and foremost thing that article touches on is I want you to make sure you understand that when you install the SharePoint framework, so let me say that again. When we talk about installing the SharePoint framework, in reality, you're not doing that. All you're doing when people talk about installing the SharePoint framework, what they're really doing is they're installing a generator for Yeoman. And the only thing that generator does, is that it is only used to create a brand new project, right? Period, full stop. That's it, nothing else. It does nothing else. In fact, if you gave me a SharePoint framework project and I did not have Yeoman installed or the generator installed, I'd be just fine. I could still use your project. I couldn't create a new project because I don't have the Yeoman generator I don't have the Yeoman installed or the Yeoman generator for SPFx, but I can still work with the project because the only thing that generator does is it's only used inside of Yeoman to be able to create what do you call it? To create the project, all right? Each project then inside of it defines what version of the SharePoint framework it's based on. And that's when you look in the package.json file, and when you see all those SPFx packages, like at Microsoft SP web part base or SP core something, base core or core base, whatever it is, there's a collection of them. There's usually about at least 3 or 4, and they all have the same version number. That's the version of the SharePoint framework that project uses. The project itself defines the version of the SharePoint framework that it uses. So they're 2 totally different things. So what I recommend people do is that you always, unless you're working on-prem, you always want to use the latest version of the SharePoint framework generator that's available to you, because it's going to have the latest templates, it's going to support the latest stuff, and you're going to be using the latest SharePoint framework package dependencies to make sure that it's addressed any kind of like security issues or performance issues or even bugs that are there. All right. So I recommend that everybody does that when they create a brand new project. Now, for all of your other projects, the question comes up of, well, how do I actually work with multiple SharePoint framework versions on the same, like if I have 5 projects and they all are using different SharePoint framework versions, how do I go through and have a good developer experience on my laptop? That's number 1. And then number 2 is, should I upgrade those projects to the latest SharePoint framework version? So first and foremost, let me say a couple things. I would never upgrade to the latest version of the SharePoint framework right when it comes out. I would always wait at least 2 weeks, if not a month, because the SharePoint framework team has a very consistent track record of introducing regressions. And so I would say, chill, wait for it, just wait. No reason to rush into the new one. All right, so that's one. The second thing that I would say is, should you upgrade all of those older projects to the latest version of the SharePoint framework? I think that's going to be a case-by-case thing. I think that when you look at your projects, you should just think about it and say, am I gaining anything by this? Is there anything in the newer version of the SharePoint framework that this project is going to benefit from? And if there's not, then you're like, I don't know if it's worth the effort, right? That's up to you. If it's a small project, might not be much work. If it's a big project, might be more work. If it's just one version, you're going from like what you did, 1.20 to 1.21.1, probably not a lot of work. If you're on 1.12 and you're going to 1.21.1, probably a lot of work, right? It depends. So really this all comes down to just, and it depends, and should you do it or not, all right? I do think that when 1.22 comes out, once we are comfortable that it's pretty stable, like I would definitely wait a month on this one. Because you want to wait, and you want to then look at the main issues list, and you want to say like, is there anything out here that's like a hot button issue that needs to get fixed, or am I going to break my stuff if I switch over to it? Switch this project over to it or that project over to it. So the other thing that you want to look at here is that, well, how do I, so you said, like, if keeping versions consistent is better, what's the best way to ensure NPM installs compatible library versions for a specific SPFx release? So what I would do is, so first of all, there's no way that you can have 100% control over this, right? So for this part of your question, there's absolutely no way that you can have 100% control, because for me, whenever I look at the package.json file, whenever I install packages, or I even use the ones that Microsoft has listed in package.json, both under dependencies and dev dependencies, I always remove the caret and the tilde prefix on package versions. Why? Because I want to ensure I'm always getting that specific version. I want to have control over which version that my project is using. So for example, like when SPFx 1.20 came out, the Azure Core v1 package, it worked with Node 18. It worked with Node 18. But later, Azure Core got updated, and that update required Node version 20 or higher. If it had a caret or a tilde in there, and that prefix tells npm install. It says one of them controls the minor version, one of them controls the patch version. And so if you have like, if it's like 1.9.0, if I don't remember which is which, I always forget it. I always forget which one's which. But between the tilde or the caret, whichever one controls the minor version, then if I install it today, I get 1.9. Install it tomorrow, 1.9. But if 1.10 comes out and I do an npm install again, it's going to say, oh, you can get 1.9 or anything higher than that, which includes 1.10, right? I don't like those carets. I don't like those tildes. I like to have full control. So I make sure I take all of that out of the package.json when I install a new SPFx project. Second of all, the other thing, or when I create a new SPFx project, second of all, when I install SPFx new packages, I always put the -se or -de on my install command. Effectively, what that does is so -se is the shorthand for --save--exact, and that says when you install the package, put the version number in package.json, but don't put a caret or a tilde in front of it. No prefixes. When you do the -de, that's when you are using the switches --save--dev and --save--exact. So just a -de on the install command will make sure there's no carets or tildes in the version number and put it in the dev dependency section. -se will put it in the dependency section. And all that's documented how that works on the npm install documentation page on npmjs.org. The other question that you have, that you didn't really ask it, but what if I have projects of different versions that are using different, and those different versions of SPFx have different versions of Node they support? Sorry, let me go back. The one thing you don't have control over is if I install a package and that package, he's got his own package.json file, which is going to have his own dependencies. And those dependencies may have a caret or a tilde. I can't change that because that's not my package. I don't control it. So how do you keep the versions consistent and make sure that it always installs what's needed for a specific release? You can't, you don't have full control over that. It sucks, but you just don't have full control over that. And you want to be careful about it too, about trying to like force those installs, because if you've got this, I mean, the SharePoint Framework package dependency tree is big and nested. Like I think there's over 1,000, not over 1,000, a couple hundred dependent packages that they all use. And if you get like deep down this whole thing and say, well, that one's using a newer version, not supposed to. And if up here I try to force the install, who knows if like down the other tree, that one doesn't use this new one because it's a conflict. So you don't really have any control over it. This is also why when we create a brand new project, we create npm install generates a package-lock.json. And that is a snapshot of all of the packages that this project needed and all of the versions of those packages. And so if you gave me a project without a node modules folder, but it did have a package-lock.json folder, when I ran npm install, it's going to get the specific packages that are defined in package-lock.json, which is what you defined. Even if you created that package lock 7 years ago, well, that's probably not true because I don't think package locks go that back or that old. A year ago. It doesn't matter because when I install it, it's going to get whatever that package lock has in it for the versions. It doesn't respect carets and tildes. All right. If ever I install something new, it's going to edit package lock. All right. So hopefully that helps a little bit. Oh, sorry. The last thing I'll say is that, well, what about if I have different versions of SharePoint, different projects that I'm working on that use different versions of Node? That turns into being a nightmare because then I got to uninstall Node and reinstall Node. My recommendation, use the fast node manager. I used to say use NVM, the node version manager for Mac OS, but I now switched over and I'm using the fast node manager, FNM. And I have an article on that. I'll grab a link to it, just drop it in the chat here really quick. This guy. So let me drop this in the chat. I'll put it in the chat here on the Voitanos site, and let me on the Voitanos stream, and let me also put fast node manager. I'll put that here in the main chat as well. So I would definitely use the fast node manager. That's my preference because it allows you to very easily have multiple versions of Node installed and then jump between different versions. And it also respects the fact that if a project has a .node-version file in it, or .node.rc, I think is what it is, you put the version number in that file and it automatically will switch over to the correct version of Node if you have it installed. And if you don't have it installed, it'll ask you, do you want to install the version that this project wants? So it's an easier way to manage stuff. So that's what I would say. So it's a long answer to what you asked, but I hope that that's actually going to help. That helps you, Eric. Okay, got another question here that was posted from Jason. Sabby, I just saw your other question that was posted. I hope we have time for it. I'm not sure, but let me see. Jason says, what are other use cases for agentic copilots outside of the customer service action taker that is discussed all the time? Oh, man. So think about it like this. You might actually want to tune into a webinar. I'm going to mention that I have coming up in a couple weeks or so. Think about it. Do you ever think about it like this? Do you ever go to Copilot and use the exact same instructions? Do you ever go to Copilot and tell it to use or exclude the same specific knowledge, right? Do you don't look at this SharePoint document library, or don't take data from this other source, or don't use web search? Do you ever tell it to not do something in a set of instructions, or do you use the same instructions every time? If the answer is yes to any of those things, that's why you would create an agent. The reason why, and when you say agentic copilots, it's not agentic copilots. It's I'm creating an agent for Copilot. When you go to Copilot, Microsoft 365 Copilot, either in m365.cloud.microsoft or the Copilot app inside of Teams, when you go to Copilot and you issue a prompt, you're using the generic agent. Your Copilot is an agent. What Copilot supports is the ability for you to create custom agents by extending the Microsoft 365 Copilot stack, where you can specify custom instructions, specific knowledge you want to use or exclude, and REST APIs or actions that you want it to have access to get real-time data or to take action somewhere else. I can think of tons of examples of this. Like the demo that I like using is a vacation request, a PTO request agent. That's one of the ones that I use in my classes. I have one that I've created to, like, I want to learn everything about, like, somebody sends me an email and they want to buy, they are interested in one of my courses. I'm like, this person's familiar. Her email address is really familiar. So I want to go search. What do I know about this person? Have they ever bought a course for me? Go check Stripe. Go check my student portal. Are they in my my CRM? Have I ever we ever talked in the past about different things? That's not inside M365. So I want to go search that over there. What are they on my newsletter, and have they engaged with me? I want to go through and reach out to my ESP, my email service provider. And so what I would do is I would create an agent that allows me to pass in an email or multiple emails, and that agent can go out to all these different sources and pull them all together and say, hey, look, you've talked to Emily. Emily's been a subscriber to your newsletter for the last 5 weeks. She's attended like 3 webinars. She actually bought this one course like 4 years ago. She's been posting these questions in our student portal, or in our student community. So that immediately, instead of me having to go through and check all these different sites and do searches on each one, an agent's going to allow me to kind of simplify that and speed it up. The PTO request agent that I like to use, very specific instructions. I don't have to retype those instructions. I can just type in to my PTO agent, I'd like to submit a vacation request leaving this Friday for a long weekend in Miami. and I'll come back on the following Wednesday. The instructions in my PTO request say we need to know when you want to go, where you want to go, and how long you're going to be gone. And it tries to take out, the instructions say, try to get that information from the prompt. And if not, make sure you prompt the user for these different questions. Otherwise, if I was just using the general Copilot experience, I would say, hey, here's a big text thing on our intranet. When you want to do a vacation request, go to Copilot, paste in these instructions, and then put your vacation request, what you want to do in there, and we'll figure it out. An agent's much better because now I can just say, hey, now I go through, collect this information from the user, but then once you got the information from the user, go check it against the vacation request policy, which is in a Word document on our SharePoint site. It's right there. Make sure it conforms to the vacation request policy. Once it did, based on where they're going, reach out to this web service to find out what the weather's going to be like at that time of year in this location, give them a forecast, plus, and do all this other stuff. But the user only has to know, I'd like to go on a long weekend. I'd like to take some PTO leaving this Friday, going to Miami over the next 4 days. And it would figure all that stuff out for me. That's what an agent's for. And actually, that's what I teach in terms of like creating custom agents or custom declarative agents. Okay. I know I got one question here from Savvy in the chat here, but I need to keep this. We're running short on time, so I'm probably not gonna be able to get to that today. One of the things I want to do before we wrap up, I do want to just cover a couple things here, some stuff that's coming up. First, thank you very much for everybody who joined me. If you didn't get your question answered or during our office hours, please feel free to go to the Voitanos website, find where on the webinars, look at the most recent one that's going to be posted, which will be this one, and drop your question in the comments at the bottom. Or Savvy, you're one of my students, so you can do that on the event inside of this for this event. This is where you can find me. You can go to, I'm on LinkedIn, I'm on Blue Sky, I'm on YouTube, most active on those. I've also got my newsletter that I mentioned, and I have my podcast as codedeploygo.live, new episode tomorrow. Make sure you subscribe so you get it. A couple of things that are coming up. I have a webinar on, wait, is that correct? All of a sudden I just questioned did I change the date on the wrong, did I put the date for the wrong one? Yep, I sure did. Darn it. So the date for this one is actually November the 11th. So it's going to be before our next office hours. So this is going to be a webinar where you can go register for this. It's free. And you'll be able to see how to use TypeSpec to create declarative agents. We will be very, very close to the release of the GA release of TypeSpec. So this, if you go here, register for this webinar, you'll learn a lot about it then. I also have another webinar, and now I see what I did because it looks like I got my dates backwards. So again, the TypeSpec webinar is on November the 11th. When you go register for it, it's the correct date. And if you go to, I have another webinar coming up on December the 9th. My two dates are backwards. Sorry about that. This is a news session that I've done recently. I did it last week in Boston at the Collab Days New England event. And I also did it at M365 Twin Cities at their community event back in September. It's called Evaluate Your M365 Copilot Agent Options. Might be interested in this, Jason. I talk about all the different options you have for creating agents on Microsoft 365 Copilot, starting with the least powerful, but the least amount of skills required using SharePoint to create an agent. Then working up through Copilot Studio Lite, which used to be called Agent Builder, Copilot Studio Full, which is the copilotstudio.microsoft.com, and going all the way to declarative agents with the Agents Toolkit. So you can definitely go through and register for those. Mohammed, thanks a lot for mentioning that. I will make sure that those get added. I actually changed the title for one of them. I'll make sure that those are posted where you can register for them, but you do it will require like an extra registration through Teams because I deliver the webinars through Teams. And so you have to register to get the link for those. So you want to use the links for these. These are all published on the public website. If you go to webinars and it talks about, like right now, it talks about the upcoming webinars. Well, the next webinar is the one we're in right now. And the next two are, our next 2 or 3 are already listed there. So later today, you'll see that actually get updated as well. The dates on the website are correct. They will be posted in our, in Voitanos Learn soon. All right, thank you very much though for letting me know about that. Jason, one-time fee for your Copilot course, material on demand, like SPFx course. Right now, good question. Right now, my Copilot, my Declarative Agents Copilot course, which I'll just grab a link for that so you can see it. That is a live workshop. So that is a live virtual workshop. The next time I'm teaching that is in December. And I'm making some changes to it. So all I would say is that keep an eye on the website. I do have an on-demand course that I am working on. I don't want to promise any timeline on that, but the live workshop is also, it will be something where you get access to all the recordings for a fixed amount of time after you attend the workshop. The website says a little bit differently now, but that's all getting changed throughout the course of like this week. I'm making a bunch of changes to some stuff. So it's not going to be done like my SPFx course. I'm changing how I'm doing a lot of stuff over the next few months. So yeah, it's not a one-time, it will be a one-time thing, but you get access to the content for a certain amount of time. Yeah. All right. With that, we're pretty much done. Thanks a lot for everybody for all of your questions. And Jason, if you have any questions about it, I see you're connecting through on LinkedIn on Voitanos Learn. Just shoot me a message in Voitanos Learn. I'm happy to go through and explain it to you. Our next office hours will be on Tuesday, November the 18th. That will be listed on the public website. It's also listed in Voitanos Learn, and you will see that posted all very, very soon in all the other places. So with that, thank you very much, everybody, for joining me today. I hope you learned a lot from our office hours session today. Make sure you come back next time. I'd love to get any feedback you got for it, if you have anything you would suggest. But with that, I'm already 5 minutes over, so we're going to wrap it up. Take care, everybody. I'll see you in a couple of weeks. The next office hours in November 18th.